Hi, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to ATX Television Festival Season 10. I'm Jennifer Morgan, the Director of Programming, and we're excited to have you here for this inside look at animation series, and in some cases, series that are newly animated. 2020 threw the TV industry and the world a lot of curveballs, as we all know, and while most productions were shut down entirely, some proved to be a little more adaptable to this newly remote world. We ourselves were very curious to learn more about what the last 15 months were like for these pandemic-proof series, so we've gathered some of our favorite creatives here to talk about it. So let's dig in. I'm going to hand it off to our excellent moderator, Ben Travers from IndieWire.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Jennifer. I am so excited to be here with all of these talented creators and producers to talk about pandemic-proof adult animation. So let's get right into it. I am so very, very, very pleased to introduce all of these panelists, starting with the creators and showrunners of Fox's The Great North, Wendy and Lizzie Molyneux.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Next up, we have Ralph Farquhar, the executive producer of Disney Plus's The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, coming in 2022. Ralph.
Hey there. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Am I loud enough?
I think so. I can hear you. I feel like that's the most important thing. So yeah, I think you're probably pretty good. Next up, we have a couple of folks from Star Trek Lower Decks. We have the creator, EP, and showrunner Mike McMahan, as well as the director at Titmouse, Barry J. Kelly.
Hi.
Hey guys, thank you for being here. So excited to talk about Star Trek. But before we dig into everything, last but not least, the executive producer of No Activity, Joe Hardesty.
Hello.
Joe, hey, thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, we've got a great group. I wanted to start off by taking us all the way back to March 2020 when the pandemic really started to hit in America and production started to shut down. Everybody had to figure out a new path forward. Wendy and Lizzie, starting with you, I just wanted to know, where were you in terms of production when that happened? Like at what stage of things were you at when, you know, you really had to start thinking outside of the box and how are you going to keep this thing going?
We were getting toward the end of our writing production for season 1. So we were about to table read episode 13 of the 13. That ended up being our first virtual table read. And so we were, we'd only been together as a team for the new show for, I guess about 8 months at that point. So it was fairly early on for us.
And then, what went through your mind when obviously when it first happened and everything shut down, the priority was, health and safety and everybody in your family being healthy and safe. But when did you start thinking about, okay, is there a way for us to keep this going forward? And what were those discussions like?
Well, from the minute we got home, the bento box side of it, our production arm, our studio kicked into figuring it out right away. I don't know if anyone else here knows Janelle Momery, who's our supervising producer on both Bob's and Great North and some other projects. She was figuring it out from the minute we hit home. Like she just was on it. And within a couple of weeks, everyone was like one by one going into the building to pick up their computer. And like, we knew we were going back up and running almost right away. Like, I don't remember a time. Maybe I wondered a little bit if we were going to keep going, but it very quickly became clear we were going to. So it was like, which is no surprise if you know Janelle, she just figured it out and got us back up really quickly. I think the biggest problem was not like creative stuff. It was more like, how are we going to deal with this kind of file size at home for uploading animatics, uploading color, people to supervise that process and how to get the right equipment to people's homes and stuff. So no one had to be in the building. So it was really just a logistics puzzle that we're not the logistics people. So we didn't have to deal with that. I think our biggest question was like, everyone was sort of panicked at first. So it was like hard to be like, okay, I know you're panicking, but we have alts for you. It's like, you're worried about death, but could we all the bit on page 58 is like, it's a lot to ask of people, but I think maybe it was a nice distraction for people. So people seem to respond well to when we got Zoom rooms up and running as like something to do that wasn't thinking about, the pandemic. So I don't know if I answered your question. I forgot.
Oh, you absolutely did.
Thinking about last March. I got lost in my own process of recalling what now seems like 15 years ago.
There's so many memories that just come flooding back as soon as anybody says March 2020. So no, that was absolutely great. But going over to Ralph, I mean, obviously, with the Proud family coming back, you may have been in a different space, but what was kind of the immediate factor for you? Like, what were kind of the considerations that you had to tackle when you were thinking about moving the show forward once the pandemic hit?
Well, we didn't. I just remember not stopping. We left on a Friday and found out over the weekend we weren't coming back. So, so we were in the writing stage. We were still bringing on artists and gearing up for production. So the first thing was, well, how can the writers meet? And over at Disney, we were doing Blue Jeans at the time. And I remember thinking, okay, we could do better than this. So I opened a Zoom account, which I was only aware of through a charity board I had been on for the past couple of years. And we used to do Zoom meetings. I'd never heard of Zoom before that, to be quite honest. And, but it turned out to work real quick. So we just like went right into it. I mean, just literally did not skip a beat. The only word I had was I couldn't remember exactly what rotting food I left in my office, but there was something, I was pretty sure something was growing in my office after a week that was gonna pose a danger to anyone nearby. So it was sort of, okay, we're in it. So now we're in it, and how do we do it? And our big thing was we were getting ready to begin a recording. So how do we best record our actors remotely? And so that became the biggest challenge, and ultimately the thing that caused us the biggest, the biggest hiccup in our production. So. Anywho, but it was cool. The great thing about I was very thankful I was in animation, to be quite honest, because I do live action also, and so we pretty much didn't miss a beat. I don't know about the rest of the guys, but that was that's the good thing about animation. And I think the other good thing was we were able to access artists and talent worldwide, which was we've had artists from Dubai to Texas, that was kind of great too. So there was a lot of upside to it. And I got to be at home with my pets. So who can ask for more?
That's definitely a benefit. Those are always the most cheerful parts of any of these stories, I think, including right now when we're having these conversations. There's bound to be a pet to show up at some point. But Joe, you were in a little bit of a different boat with no activity. That was something that was, purely live action, contained, a good dose of improv when things were happening in live action, and you made the decision to pivot the show to an animated series. Can you talk a little bit about, how that decision came about and what were the first kind of obstacles that you had to tackle to know that you could even pull it off?
Yeah, it was crazy. First and foremost, I'm sure like everyone's, it was absolutely nutty to get where we are today, which is as of yesterday, our 8th episode just aired. We had written and were prepping our live action show. So it was written for live action. We'd actually been picked up right after the pandemic had started. So we were writing during the pandemic, and we were in pre-production in June or July. And as we got deeper into prep, we have a lot of actors who are guest stars, and they're on other shows, and it became apparent that it was logistically, with the COVID protocols that all the studios had, to share an actor who was on another show, it just became too great of a scheduling feat, and we just literally couldn't get the people that we needed in the same space. So at that point, we stopped down production, and someone at the studio was, of course, we all wanted to figure out a way to keep it going, and the animation was the first thing that kind of popped up, and our creators got very excited, our creators, Trent O'Donnell and Patrick Bramall. And literally instantly, we didn't really skip a beat. We started meeting with, animation houses, and we went with this company called Flight School based out of Dallas, and they really held our hands through it because all of us were live action people. We had never done animation. So here we are come October, I believe. We're just starting square one of a first season show in animation, and our first episode was airing in March. And from what I hear in animation, that's crazy and maybe not possible. And we found out that they were right about the crazy. It definitely the accelerated timetable was just absolutely nuts. But somehow our flight school was able to make it happen. But yeah, the improv element of it, we didn't want to lose. That was such an important part of live action. Our show was built on getting two people in a space and letting them go to town and using our material, but really letting them and our directors just see where it goes. So that was really important. So what Flight School helped develop was these kits, essentially these two big Pelican cases that we shipped to our actors. And it had an iPad for face capture, and it had a computer for Zoom reference, and it had microphones and lights and all these things. And we had actors sometimes in England doing a scene with an actor in New Zealand. We had scenes with LA-based actors doing New York and Australia. So we had talent all over the world, wherever they were at the time. And we were, through this kind of crazy rig, able to maintain that spirit of improv. So we scheduled it kind of like we normally would in live action, where we're always just getting everyone together, and just via Zoom we're able to do all the improv and the riffs and the alts. So it was again, I wouldn't say our experience was typical to the normal process, but I actually wouldn't know because I've never done the normal process. But I know that it was very difficult and very fast, but we're all so happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, without knowing the backstory, I feel like it's a pretty impressive accomplishment, and then just adding in all of those factors is only adds to it. But before we get too far into the nitty gritty of production during a pandemic, Mike and Barry, I was curious if you could talk a little bit about if there were any kind of general misconceptions out there that you wanted to lay to rest in terms of kind of getting started with animation in a pandemic. I feel like one of the things that I heard a lot as things were started was what some of you have said, where it's just like, no, we're just going to keep working. We can do this. It's not going to be a problem. We can just kind of pick this up and do it remotely and get it going. But I feel like it had to be a lot more challenging than that. And there had to be questions looming in your mind where you're just like, what about this? What about this thing? Like, how are we going to address this problem? What were any of those? Did that pop up for you guys?
Yeah, we sort of lucked into, there were a couple things we were doing before the pandemic started that kind of eased us into it. So on Lower Decks, Rick and Morty and Solar Opposites, when we had a cut coming in, we would watch it all on our computers and note it up in an application called Frame.io or Collaborate. And then we just transferred into using those without actually meeting in person afterwards. So we kind of had the format all set up, and we ran into the same problems a lot of these guys ran into, because it was like our first day of writing. So the writers weren't used to Zoom, and when everybody was buying up toilet paper and all of that craziness at the beginning of it, at the same time, people were all buying up microphones for use at home.
Yeah.
So we were running into there were no microphones anywhere anymore, and Apogee was out, and it was crazy. So because everybody was making these kits and everybody was jumping on. Look at Joe. Suddenly live action shows are turning animated. It's crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Which is awesome. And, I think it was going around. We were hearing a lot like, wow, aren't you guys lucky? Animation is so unaffected. But that wasn't true at all. We were we were safely, the Molyneux said it too. It felt like in one day, everybody's computers were home, and they were all safe and working from home. And it felt like magic for a day. But then we're getting calls from the network being like, hey, do you mind airing 90 days early? There's a lot of other stuff that isn't going to be able to air. And we're like, sure, yeah, we'll take a crack at it. And suddenly we're moving up our advertising, and we're trying to fill in this gap and be team players, because we know that we're keeping everybody working and safe, and that we can accomplish it and do it. We're not agreeing to do anything that isn't possible. It's just, you kind of lost the buffer, a lot of the buffer across the board, like, and Barry can speak towards the artists, but man, doing ADR during the pandemic, like, yeah, animation's pandemic proof, but something that used to take 5 minutes could now take 4.5 hours. Cause it's like every single actor has different home Wi-Fi. Nobody knows when gardeners are coming or when a dog will get frightened of an airplane. Like the latency of trying to match lip flap over, the software, and somebody lives in the desert. And maybe like at one point I remember being on the phone being like, I'll buy them better internet. I'll pay for it. Just please install it. And then like, you don't know when you're casting that it would have been easier to cast 15 fewer people, because then there's going to be 15 fewer things to navigate during a global pandemic. And on top of that, we all thought, the curve was going to get flattened, right? So you had a lot of people arguing about, is this a 2-month problem or is it a 2-year problem? And we just decided right at the beginning, let's all hope that it's a 2 or 3 month problem, but let's all create solutions that say we can use it for years solution. So luckily, as we kept going, we didn't run into a end date of our solutions, which was great. But the writers didn't, the writers were happy to stay home. They missed their free lunches, but we had a blast doing it, and everybody was safe, and we were able to keep everybody working together. It's weird that there's some writers we never met in. But Barry, let me throw it to you, because audio and writing and watching stuff online through the apps was really the big difference for me. But like, what did you guys encounter? Because I never saw the art didn't get worse and it wasn't any later, but you guys must have been doing some stuff under the hood that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the file size thing was a big thing we didn't foresee. It was just like, it felt like everything was moving like 30% slower almost, like we could do everything we could from home, but it was just, there was just little extra steps that we were just not accounting for. We were right at the end of post for season 1, and we were just starting season 2 because we knew season 2 was happening. So we're trying to figure out, yeah, like Mike was saying, if it's a 2-week problem or a 2-month problem, or is it like going to be an entire season 2 problem, which it has. We're in post for season 2 now, and it's a year later, and there's people we haven't met in person, artists we haven't met in person. Like Ralph was saying, we have people in Nepal, we have people in Vancouver, people in New York, we have artists scattered all over the place in different time zones. And I think I realized that a lot of artists that we use outside, they only engage with us this way. And then now all of a sudden everybody's in the same boat, and it was almost a learning experience of seeing like where miscommunication can happen because we're so far removed from the office or being in an office together. I think morale has been a little bit of a weird thing, because me and Mike, we're on calls with people all day. Like I'm talking to artists constantly, but then I realized those artists at home are probably only talking to me that hour of the day. So I'm like, I don't know what they're going through. It's a lot of guessing and trying to, hope that people are psychologically okay, as well as like being able to do their job. What was I gonna say? I forgot.
Yeah, because they're only showing us the nicest corner of their house, and it's like our entire business turned into us like catfishing each other, being like, "How are you? I'm great. Like, let's get to work." It's all over. It's all over the phone now. But I mean, we'd already been working with artists in Vancouver and in town, and it really felt like, I mean, we still had a blast making the show, which was so weird. I stopped saying that. I didn't want to say that to anybody else who was like, wow, I really wish I was working right now. How are you? And I'd be like, oh, it's very hard. Like, it was hard, but we still had like, I was really worried about the communication, because anybody here can tell you, like, any production, live action or animated, it all relies on the communication between everybody. But it feels like there was just enough ways to keep up the funny stuff along with the work stuff that we were able to kind of get what we needed from the art and the writing and the actors. It was just really hard.
Yeah, like one thing I appreciate being in live action in person in the office was like we always little things like morale things, like we had marker boards and stuff like that, and we'd see everybody drawing, you could see what everyone's doing on their screens and stuff like that. And now we have to like schedule time to do that with each other. There's apps, like all our artists are much better at finding like cool apps than I am for like, we can all draw together at the same time, and we can see you drawing, and we can ruin other stuff. Like, so we found little ways to like kind of improve that psychological stuff at the same time.
Yeah, well, that was one of the pleasant surprises for us. One of the positives that happened on Proud Family was, I got to be honest, for Bruce and myself, never been closer to a production staff than I have through this pandemic. In other words, we took that time, we meet weekly, we play Proud Family Trivia, we share the art, we talk about our feelings, you know, I don't even do that
Weird.
at home. So it's like we were, it's been interesting. I feel like I know my staff much better than if we had been in person, to be quite honest, because people were going through a lot of stuff. The George Floyd situation, you know, we one of the things that we do, we have many artists of color, you know, women, you know, immigrants. We have everybody on our crew. As we like to think, it's very unique within the animation world, if you will. And so this past year was fairly traumatic for people. In addition, on top of COVID, with what's going on in the world. So we kind of rallied together, we pulled together, we huddled together. And that was the interesting thing about Zoom, allowed us to talk to people, to allow people to reach out to Bruce and myself and to Jan and Amanda, our producers. And that was one of the, I gotta say, it's was a positive outcome from this whole pandemic, and something that I know Bruce and I plan to continue when we come back to have that camaraderie. I just never experienced camaraderie this high. And look, I've never even met my assistant in person. You know, my assistant lives across the country, you know, and it's like, so it's great to have that connection, even though we're not physically close. So that was just one of the surprises for me personally in this whole past chaotic year we've all gone through.
Yeah.
Ralph,
Although I will say we just, you know, everyone on our staff is fully vaxxed, and we got to see each other last night. And personally, nice. I'm an extremely cool person who's never done cocaine, but I can only imagine that seeing so many people that you like in person all at once like that, if that is what cocaine feels like, then I get it now. I get why it's so popular. If that's what it feels like, I get it. Because it was so fun to see it. So like, we had the same thing. I felt like everybody bonded together and talked more, and we had a lot of new people join. And some people I think would have been quiet in meetings. I think maybe Zoom emboldened them to be like, I could talk about myself. Yeah. I'm sitting here with my bird. It's a point of conversation. Like we had a young woman who always had her bird with her. So that was cool. But I also think like when we all see each other again, the rush of seeing people again was absolutely insane. It felt absolutely wild. So I hope we all can look forward to that soon.
Yeah.
Well, Ralph, to kind of follow up on like the idea that your assistant is somebody who's across the country that you've never met, I did want to ask about, you know, as soon as this happened, how did the kind of thought process change from, you know, I have to hire somebody who's in town and have a meeting with them and get to know them, to like, we can open up our doors and look for people all over the world, all over the country. And then what were did the requirements just turn to, and this isn't just obviously for assistants, this is for anybody who you could staff on the show. What became the requirement for the kind of things that you look for, as opposed to, you know, well, they have to be here first and foremost. It's like, well, that's gone. Now they just need these things to be able to work with us.
Well, I mean, that became and Jan and Amanda were the ones doing the actual hiring and tracking down people. So look, be upfront. Look, we were looking for artists of color. And so we had to cast a wide net, and this was great. You know, people didn't have to be here. So that helped us in our search. But oddly enough, some of the complications was, you know, labor laws, taxes and stuff, you know, all that. When you're hiring someone from a different state, they might, you know, I don't know the rules. I just know there were complications that way, you know, or someone's in a different country, certain restrictions, and with money and God knows what else, taxes, you know, taxes pay. so that was the unexpected complication. But the requirement was simply that people had the talent and the abilities that we needed to do our show. And the fact that we were no longer a slave to being all in one space just freed us to think about whomever. I know Bruce has found some wonderful artists I don't think we would have been able to use if under the old model, if you will. And so like moving forward, that's one of the things I don't think we'll go back to. If someone's not here, that'll be okay. It'll work for us. So that's a huge positive. And also it's something, look, we've all been in the business a while. It's something people have been talking about for years. Oh, you'll be able to edit from home. I've been trying to figure out for years how to produce a show from Martha's Vineyard. Okay, that was been my goal in life. I think we figured it out, folks. So I do not have to be here in LA, although I am. So it's so I don't think we're going to go back. We're going to have some sort of hybrid, some sort of variation. I don't know about you guys. I love being able to take Zoom meetings in my underwear in the morning. Maybe go into the office in the afternoon. Some people are talking about coming in a couple of days out the week, giving up sharing an office as opposed to having an exclusive office. So there's I think a lot of things that are going to come out of this that are going to change the way we work forever, in a good way.
Yeah, we're going to run our show from Olive Garden.
Nice.
Can you imagine how many breadsticks, guys? The con we've been wanting to run for years, and now we're just going to fucking do it. So if you guys don't just come over to the Olive Garden at the Burbank Empire Center. We're going to.
I thought Fox gave you the unlimited breadsticks at the office. They don't do that anymore.
You get one breadstick. Fox gives you one breadstick. Cool. Literally for the whole year. You have to find a way to keep it fresh.
It's amazing what the streaming era did to the unlimited breadstick stuff.
They really crazy. So yeah, makes us furious.
Now I got to figure out a way to get onto your writing staff now because it's just an irresistible perk. But I did want to ask a little bit about some of the stuff you guys have talked about in terms of just kind of being able to stay productive, but also being respectful of your employees this year, because with the pandemic, with the protests, with so much going on in 2020, it felt like a much trickier way, to just say, well, I'm just going to stay professional. Like I'm just going to talk about what needs to be done work-wise. There seemed to be more of a requirement to pay attention to what people needed. Like if they needed a break, if they needed time off, if they needed space to themselves. Joe, as a producer on No Activity, coming off of that live action and going into animation, just having people that you knew, but also having to work with so many new people. How did you go about balancing that? Like, how did you go about kind of paying attention to people in a new way, or just kind of marking off new duties that you'd have to take care of as a producer?
Yeah, I think, we were lucky in that we didn't start up our real processes with our kind of larger team until I think October. So we were all kind of in the groove of the pandemic. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we weren't figuring it out earlier. We had 5 or 6 months to really figure it out. But yeah, I mean, that's an important thing. And luckily, we're a 4th season show now. And so we do have a family, and we were able to bring a lot of, as many people as we could translate from the live action to animation, we were able to bring on. And similarly, we just this week, a few of the fully vaccinated members of our animation team who we'd never met before, we all got to gather for the first time. And it was this just, we all went through something together. We all went through this big process, and it was hard and it was difficult and it was emotional, outside of the show. And to be able to see each other in person was just, that final kind of cathartic. So that was really nice. But yeah, I'd say that we were a little bit lucky in that we did all have the time, to process before we were really in the thick of it. We were all pros at Zoom by then.
Well, Mike and Barry, what about you guys with Lower Decks? I mean, what kind of new responsibilities did you feel like you had to kind of pay attention to, or take extra care for now that you were working remotely? When as before, you might run into somebody in the hallway and have a casual conversation. How do you make room for that sort of thing? When you're working over Zoom or when you're working virtually?
I mean, I don't think that it was interesting. There were a couple times where I have to give credit to our line producer, because there was a couple times at the beginning of the pandemic, Benjamin Kaltenecker, where he would just kind of call me up and be like, why don't you just film a little video and talk to the crew a little bit, because nobody knows what the hell's going on. And I would just be like, in my living room, there's kids running around, and I clearly hadn't showered, and I'd be like, hey, everybody, and just kind of like, not like a big deal, but give we all feel alone and we all are feeling frustrated, and please communicate with us, because this is what the showrunner looks like right now. And you're not the only ones dealing with this kind of situation, which, the first time he asked me to do that, I was like, who needs this? But then I was like, oh, I'm really glad I did that. Like, it felt a little performative when I was doing it. But then when like, it was the nature of it being not well produced, and just being like, look, we're going to keep going. This is, when you first start working in the entertainment industry and you see your first office and you're like, oh, it's not all glitz and glamour. Like, we're in the worst office on this lot or whatever it is, but that doesn't change how good the thing is that we're making. Like, the thing we're making and the people you're working with matter, not the situation you're in. Like, that was the first step towards that. And then, when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, and it was obviously like, I think you have to get back in the mindset that like, that election could have gone a different way, and it would have been a very hard, thing to deal with. Like, it was not what anybody on our production, like, we're really happy how it turned out. And, it was important to keep communication up all the time, like not just in a production capacity, but just in a, hey, if you need to take this day off, fine. I would get emails like that being like, I'm not in a good headspace today. And I'd be like, cool, do whatever the heck you want. Come back whenever you want. Like, it takes us 8 hours longer to record somebody. You guys shouldn't bear the brunt of having to be on Zoom every day, like, if you're not feeling it. And there was no right perfect answer. We didn't have, like, we were figuring it out as we were going, but like, just being human and hearing people and letting them know that, like, we didn't expect 100% from everybody every day, like, because we were just, it wasn't important to get burned out for the sake of saying that we were, like, for one little thing was like, the writers, we only worked 4 hours a day with a 2-hour break in the middle. We worked 10, I think a lot of writers' rooms did this. We just naturally found that, like, 10 to noon, 2 hours off, and then 2 hours on again in the afternoon, you would get this fatigue of any longer than that. It was diminishing returns. And I think you kept finding that it's like, you had to be okay with, you weren't going to do the same amount of work you did before, because you don't have the same outlets you did before. You couldn't go out and have a drink with your friends or like see your friends at all, And so like, we just removed any expectations of timing and anything that like we were like, look, we're all figuring it out. And so any eyebrow raises were gone at people who needed time to do whatever. At least, Barry, that's what, maybe I'm wrong. And you're like, no, Mike was a tyrant.
No. I think communication would just, like, you just had to become extra clear, like, it's almost like, I feel like we almost had to do everything in triplicate just to make sure like notes were clear and direction was clear. And like, I can't even keep up with how fast Mike actually responds to emails. Like, I'm like, I see how communicative it is with all of us. Like, he responds like that. So I'm like trying to go for that because I'm never that quick. But I think as far as like just managing the like social expectations of artists, I think if we saw like a drop or something in artists' work, we're just like, maybe let's just have a conversation. Let's just talk. Let's just make sure there's no other pressure. Are you getting pressure from us? Is it time? Is it family? It's like, we're always just trying to work with people and just always trying to say like, it's not the end of the world. If you're late on a deadline, we could, you can finish this amount and we can find somebody else to handle this. And we don't even know what this figure, that's like most of my job is just kind of like trying to manage people's just pressure and expectations. But yeah, it's just checking in, more checking in.
Just one little thing to throw in what Barry's saying too, is that I find a lot of the time, and I think these guys will all agree too, is that when you're working with artists in animation, a lot of the times those are people that didn't fit into other parts of their lives. Like, they're drawn to art because that's how they express themselves, and they express themselves differently. So what you get is this kind of collective group of oddballs and super funny, interesting, sort of like expressive people, but they aren't expressive in the same way. And I think like it's understood when you're working with a lot of people that have found a community with each other, that like you have to be extra attentive and really understand that, like, you know, we'd have to go out of our way to be like, we're all taking a day off today. This was an intense news day. And it wasn't just Black Lives Matter. It was politics. It was, you know, the Asian community dealing with all of this stuff. Like it's stuff that's always been there, but like we tried to go the extra mile, even if nobody was asking for it, just because sometimes our artists wouldn't be comfortable asking, you know, because they're kind of like, we're supposed to be guiding them, and you know, it was new hats to wear because like we weren't seeing them every day, and it's probably an impossible task, but you do your best. And we were definitely aware of the pressure of it. Yeah.
Well, I know that obviously Joe experienced a little bit of this next question from a big picture standpoint, but I was curious if any of the conditions surrounding how the work got done actually affected the narrative choices that had to be made in the show, like whether that meant you know, you just couldn't get a piece of animation done, so you had to change it, or you know, put it into a more like familiar scene or setting, or reuse certain things. I guess if anybody's got a top mind example, we can start with you. But I was curious with Wendy and Lizzie coming off of, you know, where you were at with the scripts and then heading into this, if anything like that had affected you in terms of like what ended up on screen. It might have even just been, you know, ideas that came out of it, but I was curious about that.
Yeah, I think we were in an interesting situation just because we got our pickup for season 2. You know, we were in the pandemic. And so I think we felt that relief of sort of knowing that we had, you know, we didn't have that pressure of not knowing if we were coming back. And so I think we, you know, jumped into our, you know, season 2 ideas, and we were kind of, you know, thinking bigger and really wanting to kind of expand our world and do all of that. So I think we really pushed the show in that way. But at the same time, yeah, I think there was a point, you know, where production was, you know, asking like, you know, let's really look at things that we've used before, backgrounds and characters and places we can go to again. Because, you know, I think Wendy and I really, you know, we always approach the show really from the writing side more than anything, because I think, you know, we wrote on Bob's for so long, and I think that's really where, you know, that's how we sort of, you know, look at the show. So I think we're always thinking, what is the big idea that we're doing, how, you know, and we're not always 100% thinking about the production side. So I think we did have to adjust a little bit as we were going through, just because, you know, I think you don't always realize how much work it is for everyone. So I think we definitely felt like we had to have that balance, and you know, I think even looking into, you know, further into season 3 and stuff, we're like, right. We can, we don't have to, you know, have a new background for a new place to go, a new character for every episode. So I think we definitely felt some of that because, you know, as everyone's been saying, I think everyone was really happy for the most part to have work to do during this and something to do every day, and, you know, maybe a distraction for things that were going on, but it's really taxing in ways I think we all maybe are just sort of starting to feel in a way as we're sort of, you know, getting out of that. People were doing a lot of work and doing a lot of stuff at home and taking care of everyone throughout this whole process. So I think yeah, we definitely had to find the balance with that.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
well, looking into the future a little bit, and I know that you've talked about, like a few of you have talked about this already, but I guess when it comes to voice casting, when it comes to seeking out people for work, you know, on these animated projects going forward, do you think that it's going to be feasible to keep, you know, kind of the group, like who could work from home, who could work remotely, to keep looking for those actors? Do you think it's going to start being more feasible to, you know, just bring people into the studio more often and get them that way? Like, has this opened up more doors permanently, or is it something that you're still trying to kind of figure out?
Well, I think if I can jump in, one of the advantages, because we try to cast a lot of, you know, interesting people, so it's made it easier in some ways because we can just get people in their homes. Yeah, you can't get easier than that. And So we kind of squeeze people in, you know, and when before it would be, well, I'm not in town, I'm not available. I always tell this one story. I mean, years ago, very illustrious actress, we got her to agree to do the show, and older, and she said she needed hair and makeup. I said, we don't have budget for that. We're animation. She said, well, I don't go anywhere without hair and makeup. So we don't have that problem anymore. So, and so it's been easier in that way. And so I'm glad about that. So now that we know we can send these little kits out that we've developed and record and get studio quality work in their place of choice, it's kind of cool. So
Yeah, we got a few yeses this year that I don't know that we totally expected to get. Like Patty Lupone did a part. We have Pam Greer's doing a part. Like just who are, you know, and I think right now she's out of state and, you know, on her own property. And we're just she's like, oh no, I've already recorded in my closet for something else. And we were like, delightful. We'll just send you a new mic. Because like 90% of US mail now is microphones being sent to famous people. So we're gonna send her something, but like it was nice. I mean, I think that is, like you're saying, a great thing to take into the world. It's like, because sometimes it is just the agent coming back to you and saying, sorry, they're doing a Broadway play right now. They absolutely can't go into a studio. It's like, well, great. They can go in their bathroom and build a little pillow fort around themselves. Dignity, great dignity. Meryl Streep can build a pillow fort in her bathtub and do your
It'll
show.
be fun.
Yeah.
You know who
that's a plus.
If anyone
You know
can
who
have
I
fun in
love,
her tub, it's Meryl Streep.
You know who I love casting now as podcasters? People who are funny, have a home mic set up, and know those files, and they can be like, how do you want me to send the file? And I'm like, the audio comes in and you're like, oh.
Right.
Everyone in the country is an audio engineer now. It's great because everyone has a podcast or has done one of our shows this year.
Yeah.
So we're good.
Yeah. Now the first question is, what kind of equipment do you have?
Yeah.
All right, you got the
Yeti,
part.
you got an Apogee. What do you got? What are you working with?
I know so much more about microphones and pop filters than I've ever wanted to know in my life. And by the way, guys, if somebody doesn't have a pop filter, you know this trick. You have them put their finger up, they can go Pennsylvania, and it doesn't pop anymore. We've made a lot of actors put their finger on their mouth this year. Yeah, it's been a weird one.
Yeah, and for us too, you know, we typically in live action, we struggle just, same thing with schedules, with people out of the country. We had actors and directors in like 5-6 countries doing feeds with each other. So that absolutely opened things up for us in an amazing way. And actually, you know, animation opened up our show in a really cool way. We got to do things we would never be able to do. Our show is built in like little two-handers in one set. Like that's kind of how our whole show exists. We put these people in these sets, and all of a sudden we're like, oh wait, we can open up the world a bit. Like we can send a car off a dock into the water and like actually do that, like, and make it look good. So it was very, you know, there's a lot of freeing things that animation brought to us, you know, but probably the biggest was our ability to get more actors. But across the board, we were pleasantly surprised with how much more we could open up our story.
Well, it's been so exciting to see just all the innovations and all of the incredible output that you guys have been able to churn out during very difficult conditions. And I know that you've made a lot of people's lives easier. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing everything. Can't wait to see what's next for all of you. And again, just thanks for being here.
For having
Thank you,
us.
man.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.